So this is a sort of abstract lecture I like to give about what I call the STATRIX. We'll get into what that means in a bit, but I like my lectures to have subtitles. So we have the boring subtitle, which is the process of government, the how to mess up the world in 7 easy steps, why I hate the Washington, D.C. metro system. Anyone been to Washington, D.C. and got caught on the metro? So, okay, well, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And then finally, getting Charlie off the MTA. Now, for anyone who has not ever seen this lecture before, which you probably haven't, there's one online version of it. Does anyone, it would blow my mind. I will buy you a free drink at the reception if you can, anyone knows what this is a reference to. All right, so as Ed Sullivan knew, Ed Sullivan was an American TV host, or Johnny Carson, always opened with a number. And so in 1949, there was a mayor race in the city of Boston. And there was a guy who ran for mayor who was the technical term would be pinko commie fascist. And it was not a very popular time to be a communist in America in 1949. You had Joe McCarthy having hearings in the Congress about House Un-American Activities Committee. And so he couldn't raise any money. But what happened was he had all the folk singers on his side. If you know anything about folk singers, they're all pinko commies. And so he had all the folk singers write campaign songs for him and drive around the city playing them out of trucks, playing them in front of large public gatherings. One of the issues in that campaign was whether or not to raise the cost of the metro 5 cents. To get off the metro, to raise it 5 cents. And he opposed that, so these pinko commie folk singers wrote a campaign song for him, which 10 years later was remade by a band called the Kingston Trio. Kingston Trio is kind of like Mumford and Sons of 1958, or the Lumineers, or kind of like a folk rock band. So we're going to listen to the song now. Why would I play this strange song for you? So when I was a Cato intern, if you know anything about Cato interns in DC, we're generally poor. That's the word I'm looking for. Like really poor. I always tell the interns at the beginning, because we have events at Cato where we give sandwiches out. And if you're a really savvy intern, you can sneak in there and grab some sandwiches after the event and put them in a bag and like maybe have food for like 3 days. So I still have these like Ziploc bags on my desk from when I was like squirreling away food as an intern. So as part of being an intern, you can't really afford taxis or anything that's not the metro. So one day I go down to the metro on a Sunday, which is a bad time to take the DC metro. And I look up and I'm trying to make this brunch. There's this girl there that I really liked and I wanted to get to this brunch. I was going to splurge on brunch. And I'm sitting there and I see the two most dreaded words in the metro station, which is single tracking. What this means, the DC metro is just 2 lines. And they have all these trains that go down 2 lines. And if there's ever anything wrong with one of the lines, which is a lot, because metros are just constantly falling apart, they have to shut down one line and then run it like there's a construction on the road. So they hold the sign, stack up all the cars, let them through this way, and then do it the other side. This can turn a 20-minute trip into a 3-hour problem. And so I was sitting there waiting 3 hours for the metro, thinking how great it is that they built this metro for me as a poor person. They put it in place with taxation. They reorganized the entire world around it. They crowded out alternatives. They colluded to make sure it never goes away. They failed to run it adequately after I'm stuck on the metro like Mr. Charlie. And then, of course, they start prohibiting ways of getting out of the system, like Uber, in places where they have prohibited Uber, or other types of transportation. And as I went through that, I realized that those were the 7 steps of government ruining your life. I'll go through it again in different ways so you can get it down, but it's let's put something, implementation, a concept, let's do something for poor people, implement it with taxes, reorganize the world, crowd out alternatives, collude to make sure it never goes away, fail to run it adequately, and prohibit alternatives. And that's why Charlie's stuck on the MTA, and that's why Charlie is stuck in healthcare system and education and everything, and I'll get into that. And because here's Charlie is a poor person, right? This is the people we care the most about if we're liberals. We care the most about poor people, and that's why we're here. That's why I'm here. Charlie doesn't have 5 cents. Do you think a rich person has this problem? Riding the metro for the rest of his life and having his wife give him sandwiches as he goes through. It's apparently not a nickel, but at least a sandwich, but never mind. So It made me think about one of my favorite libertarian quotes, which is, the government is good at one thing, it knows how to break your legs, then hand you a crutch and say, see, without the government, you wouldn't be able to walk. But I also thought about how deep this concept actually goes. So you guys remember that old movie, The Matrix, which apparently they're remaking, or they're making a new version of it? Like they're doing, you want to hear Keanu Reeves, and like everyone's gonna make a new one. I'm like, like we're gonna get down to everything has been rebooted or remade except for Heil Honey, I'm Home. Anyone know what Heil Honey, I'm Home is? Oh, okay, write this down. This is the most important thing you'll learn in this lecture. In 1991, the BBC made a television show about Hitler and Eva Braun living in an apartment with Jewish next door neighbors. It was a sitcom, and it's called Heil Honey, I'm Home. You can watch the first episode on YouTube. It is crazy. All right, anyway, waiting for the reboot on that one. Okay. So why is the 7 steps of the STATRIX so bad? Why did I call it the STATRIX? Well, I realized I made those 7 steps, but I realized that there was a bigger issue going on here. I work at a think tank. I'm a professional libertarian. I professionally write papers, write briefs with the Supreme Court, try and convince policymakers and people to have other beliefs and change policies. But fundamentally, the thing that keeps a freer society from happening is actually quite simple and marvelously insidious and invidious. It's a lack of imagination. Like, people simply cannot imagine how a free society would work, and so they don't demand it at all. They've been in public schools their entire life, and the concept of private schools blows their mind. And so no one is out voting for private schools because they think it's impossible. And why do they think it's impossible? Well, I already told you the 7 steps. I'll go through them again when it goes to public schools, but the public schools made private schools disappear and then made people think that that's the way the world actually works. That world is the STATRIX. It is the fake reality that has been created by the government around us. And hopefully in a lecture like this, I can red pill you, not to have the bad connotations of all the men's rights activists, but I can give you the red pill so you can start seeing the lines of the STATRIX as Neo does at the end of the day. Because ultimately what we're in for is the persuasion of people to have imagination to demand something they've never seen before. This is the difficulty, because there's not a constituency for freedom, except for you weirdos, right? This is not, we can change the world, but we need more than people who are weird enough to come to these lectures or to give these lectures. We need people who demand things just because they like it. That's what we need. We're not like I'll talk about this a bunch, but Uber is a great example of this. Cato has been around since 1977. We're the largest libertarian organization on the planet. We have a budget of about $33 million a year and 150 employees. We could have devoted our entire existence to writing papers about taxi cab cartels, and we would have done less to expose them than Uber did in 6 months. We are at a point now in the world where sometimes the only option is not to remake the world, but to break it. Break it with permissionless innovation, as the term goes. Uber did not ask for permission to create its system. It gave it to people, and then when they tried to take it away, people said, don't take my damn Uber. We have to think about how we do that with other things to break the STATRIX. And the STATRIX is a huge problem. Here's a popular man around these parts, Boris Yeltsin. In 1989, Boris Yeltsin visited an American grocery store outside of Houston, Texas. And he was completely blown away. He could not believe. This was always a thing when the Soviets came to America. Even people with power, and presumably more knowledge than your average Soviet citizen. There was a famous thing called the kitchen debate. Anyone ever hear about the kitchen debate? So Khrushchev came to America. Nixon, as vice president, went to America and went to the Soviet Union in 1957, and then Khrushchev came to America in 1958. And they went to like the World's Fair, and one of the exhibits at the World's Fair was an average American kitchen. And it was just like, here's a washer dryer, here's a stove, here's what an average American kitchen looks like. And Khrushchev was like mocking in Russian. He's like, oh my God, look at this. They put this up a palace and they say this is an average American kitchen. Like, they called it the Taj Mahal. They were like, it was all American propaganda to believe that the average American kitchen was so good and so has so many appliances and helpful devices in them. And he and Nixon and Khrushchev then debated the merits of capitalism and socialism. It was all filmed. You can watch that on YouTube too. Boris Yeltsin comes here after Glasnost, after Perestroika, and he's blown away. He goes to the clerk of the store, right, and I don't have that picture, and he asks him if he has to have a special PhD in like food delivery science to do his job. And it's good that he went to a grocery store because there's something about grocery stores that is just crazy. We broke the STATRIX on grocery stores, right? You go to a grocery store, and think about this. You don't tell your grocery store, your grocer, when you're going to come. You don't tell him what you're going to buy, and you don't tell him how much you're going to buy. But if he doesn't have it, you fire him. Like, you fire him in like indignant rage. You like want avocados in December, and they don't have them. You're like, oh, what kind of bullshit is this? No avocados in December? Oh my God. Like, you're owed avocados in December. Because all these people got together to ship avocados via the price system in the free market. And that kind of thing means that it would be very hard to take grocery stores away. But if 70 years ago, the state started operating grocery stores, like in Boris Yeltsin's case, and I'll go through the 7 steps. If they put the grocery stores in place, if they implemented them with taxation and force, if they reorganized the world around them, if they crowded out alternatives, if they colluded to make sure those public grocery stores never go away, if they failed to run them adequately, wow, what a shock that one would be, and then prohibit, like, someone starting a new grocery store chain, average Soviet citizens would be like, there's no way that private companies could run a grocery store. And then you bring Boris Yeltsin to the United States, and he is shocked, and he goes back to the plane, and he holds his head in his hands, and he starts crying. He wrote about this in his autobiography, saying, what have we done to our people? And if Boris Yeltsin couldn't imagine a grocery store, what do you think the average Soviet citizen couldn't imagine? But even more importantly, what can't you imagine? What is the state doing now that you might think is necessary? Because you've never seen an alternative. Say, money, Bitcoin. We'll get more into that. So that's what this is ultimately about. This is about imagination. That's what this lecture is about. This is the best Willy Wonka movie ever. See, in my world, you use imagination and then you get chocolate rivers and candy marshmallows and all these things. Have you guys seen the old Willy Wonka? Yeah. So the world of pure imagination. I'm going to go back over those things again. Government process. As a process, in order to understand it, we have to understand that process to critique the state. What it is again. Concept. We're going to put something in place to help the poor, alleviate environmental stresses, distribute medicine better, whatever. Implementation. We're going to use force in some way. That's what government has that other people don't have. Reorganization. Now we're going to change the world around those things in a variety of different ways. Crowding out. It's very hard to compete against the government. Sometimes it's actually impossible to compete against the government, but it's very hard if you're trying to charge market prices and your competitor is getting a subsidized price. Very difficult. Collusion. Unionized grocery stores, voters with property rights that they care about, unionized anyone, public sector employee, colluding to make sure that thing never goes away. Inadequacy. Government's not very good at running things. Prohibition. Now someone comes up with an idea to get out of the system, and everyone comes in and says, no, you can't do that. Guess who says that? Step 5, right? The unionized people come in and say, you can't start these things. You will take away our business that we were given to by the government through steps 1 through 4. And finally, we'll talk about ways to get around it. It's not actually a step of the STATRIX. It's just a way to get around the STATRIX, circumventing it, breaking it, rather than playing ball. So, step 1, concept. Anyone ever seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington? See, even in my hardened libertarian heart, I can watch a movie with Jimmy Stewart going to Washington to make a difference. And he's just like a Boy Scout, and he's like, I'm just going to go to Washington. Everything's going to be okay. And he gets roiled by all these corrupt politicians, and he's just a good guy. This is important, though, because if we're libertarians and liberals, a lot of times we attack the motivations of government officials as being somehow mean or pernicious. But they're not, usually. They're trying to do a good job. And many of them live in the STATRIX, too. They work for the state medical apparatus because they think that the medical apparatus is necessary in some way because the market can't supply it. So we build things like Metro. This is the DC Metro system. Help poor people alleviate congestion. We start programs in America. We have Medicare and Medicaid, this is for old people and that's for poor people to help them in paying for health care. We create things like Obamacare, which is the second stupidest law ever passed in the history of America. We'll talk about the first. We can talk about the first later. Yeah, I'll keep you guys waiting on that one. So, but the point of Obamacare, we have this weird thing in America where you get insurance through your jobs. Like too many people get insurance through their jobs, which itself is stupid. It's not. It's used in other countries too. But usually the reason people get insurance through their jobs is something to do with government. I'll get back to that in a bit. Obamacare tried to make everyone buy insurance. They tried to make everyone provide insurance, and it's just been a disaster ever since. NHS, why are we going to create the National Health Service in Britain? There's no religion anymore in England. There's just the NHS. Have you ever been to an Anglican church in England? It's like the DMV of churches. I mean, that state churches are like the DMV of churches. One thing America had a free market in religion. We never had state religion. So yeah, you got like Baptists and you get like Scientologists and Mormons, because it's just a free market. And there's no state church where you walk in, it's like, okay, I guess I'll have to go to church. And some like hopeless bishop is like stamping like things. It's like the DMV. Public schools. What was the original concept of public schools in basically every country that has them, but in America in particular? Anyone have a guess on that? In America, we had this problem in the 1840s. Let me tell you about it. It's a really horrible story. There were these people who were invading America, and they were not Americans. They were beholden to a foreign despot, and they were trying to take over the country. Now, these people were Catholics. Let me just tell you, man, Catholics. Whoa. This is true. So in the 1840s, when the immigrants started coming in from Ireland and Italy, they were Catholic, and this scared the crap out of Protestant Americans. And you can see them writing things like I just said. These people are not Americans. They're beholden to a foreign despot. Basically, everything we say about Muslims today was said about Catholics in 1840. They can't be real Americans for a variety of reasons. So someone comes along and says, well, we need to have a system that Americanizes them. Not based on outcomes of like reading, writing, arithmetic, all those things, but something that teaches them good Protestant values. And they said that's public schools, which were not called public schools to begin with. They were called common schools. The literacy rate in Massachusetts for people over 15 in 1840 was 92%. That was before they had public schools. Like, this was not an attempt to try and raise the literacy rate. It was an attempt to try and make sure that Catholics couldn't educate their children in the way that they wanted to. And this got really crazy, like in Oregon in the 1920s, when they actually banned Catholics from sending their kids to Catholic schools. Because, they're not going to be American. Also because the KKK took over Oregon, but that's a totally different story. KKK took over a bunch of states. It's kind of crazy. All right, implementation. We're going to implement things with this magic power of force and taxation, the thing that everyone loves. You have the taxes. They love taxes. They're like Scrooge McDuck. They roll around in them. So taxes, what do you get? So here's a map from the Department of Transportation. This is I spent my 22 years, when I was 22, I was in Europe, and the train was so badass, and therefore we should have that in America map. Not understanding that, if this is Lisbon, Bucharest is here. It's huge, and no one lives, basically here. Maybe in that D. This is Wyoming. So Wyoming is 4 times the size of Romania and has 500,000 people in it. This is North Dakota, same story, 423,000 people. I'm from Colorado, the square one here. We drew square states in America, because we had rulers and protractors, and it was great. They're square because there's no damn rivers there. You can see on Oklahoma here, this is a river. That's where my parents are from. So they couldn't draw square lines everywhere. So you could take taxes, and you can make a rail line that goes from, say, Minot, North Dakota to Pueblo, Colorado. Now, I would know why you'd ever want to be in Minot, North Dakota, and if the only rail line goes to Pueblo, Colorado, you're just in some sort of crazy Sisyphusian hell where all you can do is go between these two cities that you would never want to go to in the first place. But look, taxes, you can do that, even though no one wants it. This is a rule that we know, right? If you're a good liberal, you understand that if the government provides something, it doesn't mean that people want it. They could build large monuments to say dictators. I've heard about those occasionally. It doesn't mean anyone actually wants a large monument to a dictator. They could build a rail line that no one wants. We kind of know that if like the market provides something, then we have to assume that people want it, right? If it's been around for a while, we have to assume that people want it. So that means, yes, we have to accept the existence of Nickelback as a non-state mandated band. Evidently people are Nickelback fans. I don't know how, I don't know why. It's a market failure, yes. I don't believe in those except for this, yes. And Edible Arrangements is this crazy store in America where they make fruit flower arrangements. And I've never met anyone who shopped there. I think it disproves the fundamental tenets of capitalism, actually. So the continued existence of Edible Arrangements might disprove everything we believe in. Or it might just be a mob front. You ever been to like a mob front deli? Like you ever been to a deli that like doesn't have like anything in it? There's one of these in Denver. It's a Russian mob is in Denver. And like you go in and you're like, oh, I have a turkey sandwich. Like, no turkey. Ham? No ham. It's like, what do you have? Bread. It's like, oh, you're just laundering money. I get it. All right, good for you. Moving on. That's Edible Arrangements. Step 3, reorganization. Oh, this is the DC Metro map. Remember the point that I'm making in general. Due to the steps, it's very difficult, if not impossible, for people to imagine alternate ways of doing things. The way DC looks fundamentally different because of the metro lines, right? Any public transportation line means that people live somewhere that sometimes they wouldn't have lived otherwise, but for the subsidized public transportation. Like you could build a metro line from center of DC to like Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And Lancaster, Pennsylvania is about 2 hours from DC. And sure enough, you know that there'd be people who'd move to Lancaster, Pennsylvania in order to take advantage of the commuting line that was produced. And then say 20 years later, they're like, why did we build a metro line to Lancaster, Pennsylvania? They'd be like, well, how are people from Lancaster going to get to work in DC? It's like, you put them there. And so yes, we have a different problem now. That's step 5. We have a different problem because now the existing stakeholders don't want the thing to go away. But you put them there to begin with, which is never needed to begin with. This is not just true of many things. Insurance in America. I said we get 76% of people who get insurance get it through our jobs. When Obamacare started, there was this whole thing about the debate over Obamacare. It was the crisis of the uninsured. 30 million uninsured Americans. Almost all these people were unemployed or underemployed, so they weren't getting insurance through the normal means. But why do so many Americans get insurance through their jobs? Anyone have a possible answer to this? Radu, do you know? So Obamacare came in and mandated. That's the doubling down system of, we've hit rock bottom, we're going to dig like hell. But no, in 1946, right after the war, they had this fear that all the American GIs coming back would create a problem with wages. So they put a wage cap in. Now, if you know anything about economics, a wage cap is just a price fix. So they said you can't pay people more than like $10,000 a year. Now, if you were worth more than $10,000 a year, they would pay you in other things, like the benefit of health insurance. That was not taxed. And so then in 1952, they put into the tax code a tax break that says if you get compensation in the form of health insurance, that won't be taxed as part of your wages. So I could decline my health insurance from Cato, take my taxed wages, and then go buy it on the private market, but that would be stupid. And therefore I don't, and most people don't do that. So we put a little thumb on the scale in 1952 that reorganized the world 60 years later, and they made everyone say, why do all these people not have insurance? It's like, yeah, because you did that. Public schools. In America, we have this brilliant, wonderful, horrible human rights violation called geo-locking of public schools. Do they have that in Romania in the same way? Or Moldova? Estimated in America that in places like DC, public schools add about 20 to 30% to the cost of a home. This is a great one. This is Breezewood, Pennsylvania. So Breezewood, Pennsylvania is a horrible little eyesore right here, right there in the south central Pennsylvania. What it is, it's a place in the U.S. interstate system where there are stoplights. Why are there stoplights? Because when they built this interstate in the late 50s, they had a rule at the time that you needed, if you merged them into a pay road, which is what this is, you had to give them the opportunity to get off the road. And so they put stoplights. This is one of the only places in the American interstate system where there's a stoplight in the road. So what happened when they put stoplights in? This. Just truck stops, strip clubs, hotels, gas stations, fast food. It's like a horrible mini Vegas. And it's estimated by the United States Truckers Association that their truckers spend 11,000 hours in traffic jams per year at this place. It's a very bad idea. Will it ever go away? No. Why not? Well, this is the most profitable part of that congressional district, one. And all those businesses are very, very concerned with whether or not that ever goes away. This is step 5, previous step 5, collusion. But this just shows that you put the tiniest little wrinkle in the road, and you can get this to spring around it. Or you put the tiniest little tax break for insurance, and you get the American insurance system. Sometimes the government doesn't need to do something like lay down an entire metro line. They can just put a little thumb on the scale, and you get something like Breezewood. Here's a good question. How does the drug war reorganize the world? Now remember, what we're trying to do here is to use our imaginations and break out of the STATRIX. So the big problem here is when people take something away in their brain, like say, so you go to your friend and you say, I want to eliminate public schools. And usually what they do is they imagine the world right now, say, all right, public schools disappeared. And they say, well, where are all the private schools? It's like, well, yeah, because the public schools made them disappear. Drug war is a similar thing. It's like, I want to stop the drug war. It's like, well, imagine all the ways drugs are used now, take it away, and they say, that would be bad. But how does the drug war actually change how people use drugs? Anyone have an idea on that? This is called the iron law of prohibition. Anyone ever try to sneak alcohol into like a football game? Anyone ever? You can tell me, it's okay. When you did that, which I know all you were good people and you never would do that. When you did that, did you try to sneak beer, or did you sneak like a flask of hard alcohol? No, what? Hard alcohol, for the reasons here. In America, we did this crazy thing called alcohol prohibition for the 1920s. The most popular drink in America the day before alcohol prohibition was beer and wine. The most popular drink in America the day after alcohol prohibition? No, it was beer and wine. What was the most popular drink during prohibition? Whiskey, bathtub, gin, right? Because what the smugglers preferred were the highest concentrated potency of that drug. And so it wasn't a demand-driven thing, as we know by the fact that as soon as prohibition went away, they went back to beer and wine. But the price of beer increased 700% during prohibition, whereas the price of gin increased about 90% because of the smuggling. And so this is not only why we have heroin, but in particular why we have fentanyl in America. Fentanyl, we have an overdose crisis in America. Fentanyl killed about 39,000 people last year in America, which is more than guns and car accidents, by the way. Fentanyl, the potency of fentanyl is 100 to 200 times that of heroin. The lethal dose of fentanyl is about 2 to 3 milligrams, which is like 3 grams of salt. That's a lethal dose. In 1 gram of fentanyl, there's enough to kill 300 to 500 people. Now, the smugglers love it because they can smuggle in an envelope sent from China or from Mexico. They can smuggle, 10 grams of fentanyl, and it can't be stopped, right? And then the users don't even know that they have fentanyl in their drugs, and so they shoot up heroin, but it's 10% fentanyl, they die. Because they use the same amount of heroin that they usually use. So when we're talking about reorganization here, when you're saying if you take the drug war away, drug use entirely changes when it comes to drugs, opiates in particular. What we've done with prohibition is essentially create a bar that only serves like Everclear, if you know what that is, like which is pure alcohol, basically. Crowding out. This is Groton Academy in Massachusetts. It's where Franklin Delano Roosevelt went to learn to quip in Latin and stuff like this. This is one of the rich people public schools that you have when you have a private school, when you have public school system. People lack imagination to the extent that when you even advance the idea that public schools be taken away, as I mentioned, they say, where are the low-cost private schools? Private schools are only for the rich. Well, yeah, in this world where the government has to compete, where you have to compete against the government to have a low-cost private school, they're going to prefer that public school. The rich get out of the system. Like Charlie couldn't get off the MTA because he didn't have 5 cents, Charlie can't get out of these public school system, but Charlie Esquire can get into the private school if his parents are rich enough. Metro system crowds out many alternatives. Let's say you wanted to start, no matter where you are, let's say you wanted to start a type of taxi service, or let's say like a jitney cab. I'll get into what that. So jitney cab is an old type of sort of taxi bus, where you kind of get together with people in your neighborhood and you say, all right, we'll take 10 people and we'll drive in and I'll charge for it, right? Now you could try to start that business, spoiler alert, except for step 7, because that's actually illegal. But let's say it wasn't illegal. But you would have to compete against a subsidized metro, right? You're having to charge people full price and a profit. The metro, no one in any city, anywhere in the world, pays full price for a metro, anywhere. There's no metro in the entire world that breaks even. New York comes the closest. But New York is also a raving cesspool in the metro. I mean, it's also a raving cesspool. I love it. It's great. You should go. But the metro is like on fire all the time in DC and New York, because you pay about 50% of the cost of a metro ticket. So you can't compete. So it crowds out alternatives. Step 5, collusion. This one's not that hard to imagine. But hopefully you're starting to see that collusion actually is more nefarious than the story we usually tell. It's not just government workers, farm subsidies. It's not just unionized workers. It's property owners who live near a good public school, right? It's property owners who live near a metro stop. If you ever try to take that metro stop away, they're not going to let you do that, because it adds 20% of value to their house. And they may be the staunchest libertarian in the world, and they don't believe in public transportation at all, but they benefit from it. So it's very hard to get someone to sacrifice 20% of the value of their home on a principle. And so the collusion gets worse. Drug war collusion, every prosecutor, police officer, DEA agent is extremely invested in there being a drug war. As we were discussing last night, the worst version of this are prison guard unions in the United States. In California in 2009, they tried to legalize marijuana, and the biggest spender against it was the prison guard union. Isn't that like the worst thing you've ever heard in your life? I mean, there's a lot of bad things about government, but they view prisons as a jobs program, which of course it is. It's like, lock up more people. Like jaywalking, screw it, who cares? Lock them up. It's good for the prison guard union. This is a guy named Marvin Horn. Marvin Horn spent 10 years in a pitched epic legal battle, which I wrote 4 briefs in his cases. He went to the Supreme Court twice, fighting against the despotic powers of the Raisin Administrative Committee. Now, this is not a Rand novel. This is not like a character in a Rand. This is an organization in America that makes sure the price of raisins is correct. Just raisins. Oh, we'll get into the Apple Growers Commission and the Peanut Commission and the Pecan Commission and the Pistachio Commission. They're totalitarians, one and all. But this is just the Raisin Administrative Committee, who are 47 people in an office building in Fresno, California, who never return my phone calls. Now, what do? They got to get the right price of raisins. So, they go out with their magic price detector and they walk outside and they go, $2 a pound. It's like, or it's dowsing, they douse it, right? Whatever, dowsing when you search for water with like a stick. Yeah, they douse it, right? What the Raisin Administrative Committee did was they took raisins from Mr. Horn and basically just destroyed them or gave them to the military. They're sick of raisins in the military. Raisins again, General? This sucks. So, in order to stabilize the price of raisins, he said, you owe me compensation for the raisins. And he won eventually after 10 years. So in the Supreme Court, there were a bunch of people supporting him, such as me and Cato Institute, but there was one group supporting the Raisin Administrative Committee. Who do you think that was? It was Sun-Maid Raisins, the biggest raisin producer on the planet. And they have 23 seats of the 47-member Raisin Administrative Committee. Now, Sun-Made Raisins doesn't need the Raisin Administrative Committee, but businesses are extremely conservative. They're afraid of change. The Raisin Administrative Committee is something they understand. They control huge parts of what it does. And so they were advocating to keep the Raisin Administrative Committee and to keep the powers of the Raisin Administrative Committee. This is a subtle type of collusion. When you start thinking about the nature of collusion in government, it ends up being much more like this time lapse of a bean pod growing. So it's looking for something to wrap around, and that's a tax break, that's a metro stop, that's the Raisin Administrative Committee, and then they wrap themselves up it, and they want to make sure that the thing never gets taken away, no matter what it is. And we know this is true. I mean, like, you could have a law that said every blue thing in America has to be launched 25 feet in the air before it's sold, and all these companies would come up and they'd be launching blue things in the air, and like 40 years later, be like, why are we launching blue things in the air? And they'd be like, my daddy launched blue things in the air, and if it was good enough for America then, it's good enough now. And if they unionize, you're completely screwed. You'll be launching blue things in the air for the rest of your country's existence. In America, milk. God, milk makes me so angry. Okay. Really. See, if the dairy industry had any respect whatsoever, they would just hire thugs to go to people's houses and say, hey, I heard you've been charging 20 cents less for milk. And I wouldn't want anything to happen to your kneecaps if you're charging less than 20 cents for milk. So you got a nice business here. It's horrible to see anything happen to that. No, but instead they do the in that spunky can-do American way that made that country great. They go whining to the government. They say, can you make sure that nobody can charge 20 cents less for milk? And they put people out of business who dare try to oppose the dairy lobby. Insurance company, I've already mentioned how the insurance agencies went to Obamacare, went to Obama and said, you should pass a law that makes every individual citizen in America buy our product. That is the greatest piece of lobbying ever done in the history of America. Alcohol. Oh my gosh. So I like beer. From Colorado, beer capital of the world. Sorry, Germany. Where's Clemens? Okay, yeah, it is. Seriously. So there's this weird thing in America is we had this prohibition and we had 50 states and all these different alcohol laws, and like Utah and like 60% of Arkansas is dry, and like Mississippi, it's like everyone has a weird thing toward alcohol. States can control alcohol within their borders due to a thing called the 21st Amendment, which is the thing that took away prohibition. What this functionally means is that I can't, so I live in Virginia now, and I can't there's a brewery in Colorado that doesn't distribute to Virginia. Now, in the real world, I should be able to open up my phone, go to their website, order like 4 cases of beer, have them shipped to my house in Virginia, and then get there when I get home, be like, oh crap, I just got a bunch of beer, do whatever age verification or whatever you want to do. That would be the way the world works, right? But no. Alcohol will not allow for such ease of use. Alcohol is some of the worst forms of protections. I mean, I can't order a beer to my house in Virginia. I mean, there are people trying to drop burritos in my mouth from drones in the sky, and I can't order a beer to my home in Virginia. This is a true thing. This is burrito drones. Now, if you know anything about Americans, it's a fundamental human right that we're within at least 10 miles of a burrito. Screw the UN Charter. That's the human right I care about. So you get a burrito like Chipotle. Yeah. So you put it in a drone with a little parachute. You fly it over, drops the drone, comes down, burrito goodness. This is what the market will deliver. Burrito goodness and Nickelback. But burrito goodness on top of that. Nickelback and burrito goodness. But not beer distribution. Anyone ever been to Pennsylvania? Pennsylvania has the craziest alcohol laws in the United States for purchasing on the spot. You have to basically get a flow chart to figure out how to buy alcohol in Pennsylvania. So there are beer stores, but the beer stores can only sell a case, which is 24 beers, and they can't be cold. This is true in Oklahoma too. They have a prohibition on selling cold beer in Oklahoma. I think they're afraid that you're going to drive in, pop it open, and just drive home while drinking it. which is weird because they do have drive-through liquor stores. So I could see why they might be concerned with that. But of course, if I don't have a cold beer and I want to drink in the car, and I'm like, well, crap, I guess I'll just have some vodka tonic, or like it's just like something that's much worse. So Pennsylvania beer store, case only, warm. Then there are some grocery stores that have a permission to sell beer, also has to be warm. Then there's state-run liquor stores that can sell some types of wine and hard alcohol, and there can be one liquor store within a 50-mile radius that can sell hard alcohol. If you want cold six-pack, you have to go to like a deli, like a place that sells food. They have to sell food, and then you go in and you can buy them at bars too. And you say, you can only buy 2 though per visit. So you go in and you say, let's say you wanted 4 six-packs of cold beer. So you walk into the deli and you're like, I'd like 2 six-packs of cold beer. And they're like, all right. And then you walk outside and you put them down by the cove and you walk back in and you're like, well, I lost the beer. I need 2 more. And he's like, oh, okay. And everyone participates in this mass delusion. So you can buy 4 six-packs of cold beer. That's despotism. Inadequacy. This one's not, the government's not very good at running things. Don't have to really belabor that point. The metro's on fire, like all the time. This is actually a website that I check every morning before I go to work, isthemetroonfire.com. Why is the metro on fire? Well, I kind of alluded to it before. We have Charlie, who's stuck on the MTA because he can't get out of it. I kind of alluded to before the fact that they don't ever repair metros, which is one reason why metros become increasingly dangerous over the years. Step 7, prohibition. This is when things get sort of unfunny, because we are living in the most amazing time for human ingenuity that has ever happened, with the possibility of things that no one had ever dreamed about before. And there's a lot of forces that are trying to stop that. So, jitney cabs, as I mentioned. Nice little cab agency, help you circumvent the crappy metro in New York and Washington, D.C., illegal. All right? Guess who made them illegal? The Union of Transportation Workers made them illegal. They're looking out for you. Uber. It depends on, Uber here. There's Uber here. There wasn't Uber in Georgia. I mean, it's kind of a crapshoot of where Uber is. The French really hate Uber because they hate all fun things. But Uber's an interesting example, right? I talked about Uber. Like, it was one of the first times I had the idea for this. I mean, I mentioned the first time I had this idea was when I was an intern. But at that time, in 2010, Uber had not yet come out. And taxis in DC were really expensive and absolutely horrible. My colleague Alex Narasto, his immigration policy at Cato, had a taxi cab driver try to fight him in the street because he didn't give him a big enough tip. And then he reported that to the taxi cab commission, and it took 2 years to take that guy's license. 2 years. If an Uber driver tried to fight me in the street, he would be fired in like a minute and a half. Right? You would message Uber and be like, this happened. Like, all right, we're taking that guy offline right now. I remember when I first was told about Uber, my friend Libby was like, my email address is publicly available, and they came to DC because they had this great business model, going back to what I was saying previous. Sometimes you have to break the world in order to remake it. They did not go in and ask permission from the taxi cab commissions or the transportation commissions to run Uber. Their plan was to come in, make you love it, and then as soon as the taxi cab commission notices, then people are going to come out and fight for Uber because they like it. That goes back to the point about anything. If you want a free market in anything, if you want freedom to reign in anything, people have to have seen that it works. Just like Soviets didn't fight for grocery stores because, especially in like the 50s, so they couldn't imagine it. People weren't even fighting for Uber because they're like taxis. I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of funny. Take every sci-fi movie you've ever seen, like the most crazy Fifth Element, Blade Runner, like out there movie. There's always taxis. Like always. It's crazy. It's like this, the sci-fi author can like imagine everything except for like any other way of getting in a car. Like always taxis. It's bizarre. So I had that sensibility too. They send a bunch of emails out to people who are prominent and me for some reason, and so they give 20 free rides with Uber. I'm like, oh, this is a joke. What kind of scam is this? My friend Libby takes it and she's like, I took that Uber. I was like, what happened? It's like, well, you call the car and you get in and they take you there. Like, They don't try to sell you like Amway products or like timeshares in Mexico on the way. No, 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 no. You just get out. It's amazing. So I get in the first Uber. I feel like I'm doing something illegal. It's like when you buy beer in Pennsylvania. You're just like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? I feel like I get in the first Uber, get in, drive there, get out. I'm just like, that was crazy. Crazy. In Austin, they like banned Uber for like a year. All these college students, who when Uber came out, they were like 13, so that's actually all they'd ever taken. And then the Uber disappears, and like I had a friend who was in school there. He said it was amazing. That first Friday night, everyone was just wandering around like, what do I do? How do I get home? I don't know what's going on. They started getting into people's cars, like spontaneous Uberization, right? Because you'd broken down barriers that didn't exist before. You have all these great things like Airbnb. Airbnb is a magical thing. One time I went to Brussels, took an Uber to an Airbnb, and met these awesome gay couple. And then we had a dance party, and then we all went clubbing later. It was awesome, and I never met any of these people. And the Uber driver came too, by the way. And everyone's like, all the hotels are like, Airbnb is taking all this business from us, especially in New York. Four Seasons Hotel is like, they're taking business from us. Like, yeah, because, I was looking at going to New York, and with Airbnb, I'm like, I can stay on Jack's couch in the Bronx or the Four Seasons Hotel. No one has ever made that decision, ever. Airbnb lets you stay on Jack's couch in the Bronx. No one's ever been like, well, Jack's couch is closed, so the Four Seasons is going to be where I'm staying. We also, of course, have dastardly things like underground supper parties. Eat With, there's a bunch of these websites where if you really like cooking, you like throw a dinner party and people pay like $100 or $20 or whatever, and you like serve a meal. Sounds like a normal, everyday thing, but until you read this article. You have to read it in a suitably evil, dastardly voice. As you sit down to dinner, this story illustrates eating out like you've never experienced before. We're talking about super secret illegal dining experiences hosted in homes. It may look like a dinner party, but it's really an underground supper club. Oh my God! Yeah, that's where we are now. So, what does this all mean? There's something really interesting happening in the world, and there's a lot of forces out there that are trying to stop it. There are some things that liberals know that are very interesting things, and these things are proving us correct. One thing we understand is that you can take everything in the world and rearrange it, and everyone will be happier, generally. Anyone ever play the trading game? You ever know this game? The trading game is a game where, let's say I go buy a bunch of things. I go buy like a bunch of different types of candy at a candy store, and I give you all in a paper bag a candy, and then I go around the class and I say, all right, tell me how happy you are with your candy on a scale of 1 to 5. Right? And I come over here and I add up the happiness quotient of the entire class. Right? Some people are like, I hate chocolate, or I hate like gummy worms or whatever, right? And then I say, all right, now you can trade with any one of the 5 people around you. And then some trades are made, and then I'm going to add up the happiness quotient again. Does it go up or down? It has to go up. If it doesn't go up, then everything we've been talking about is wrong. Then someone voluntarily traded for something they thought was worse, and then we're like, okay, economics is broken. Let's go jump off a bridge. Like, so, and then let's say I can say, okay, now everyone can trade with the entire class, right? Does it go up? Like a lot, substantially. That's just no new stuff. That's just reorganizing the stuff in the room. Now here's a different question. Let's say this class was 1,000 students big, and I tried to play the same game. All right, you can play with anyone in your row. You can trade with anyone in the whole class. We have a different problem when we get to the class. What is that problem? Like, so you trade with the entire class, 1,000 people. What's the problem now? Organization. Like, there might be someone on the other end of the class who has a thing you're willing to trade for, but you're like, it's just chaos, right? That's where markets develop. But then someone has an enterprising idea. They get up at the front of the class, they stand on the chair, and they go, all right, I got a chocolate bar right here. I got a chocolate bar for two gummy bears for chocolate bar, 2 bears for chocolate bar, 2 bears. It's sold American. Okay, 2 gummy bears. I got 2 gummy bears. Who wants coffee? And he starts being an auctioneer. Is that person adding value? Yes. What is he selling? What is he providing in the most abstract sense? Yes? What? Yes? A reduction in transaction costs, or just to say information. A transaction cost is the economic concept of something that prevents a beneficial trade from occurring. Right? So I have a lot of guitars, and right now I guarantee in Arlington, Virginia, where I live, there is someone who has a guitar who is willing to sell it for a price I'm willing to pay. I just don't know who they are. So things like eBay, Craigslist, old classified ads, pawn stores, all those exist to facilitate trades that weren't happening before. You guys follow? So on that thing, what does Uber sell? The exact same thing. Uber sells information. There's someone here, or someone in Arlington or wherever you are, who would be willing to give you a ride for a price you'd be willing to pay for. You just didn't know who they were, and it was prohibitively expensive to figure that out. So Uber merely connects people. That's all it does. Same with Airbnb. Same with things like Handy, where you just like say, I need someone to build a dresser. It merely connects people. It demonstrates the reality of the trading game, and it also helps eliminate costs that the government has claimed in the past it was necessary to regulate for the purpose of that. What's another cost that might keep you? Well, so let's say that I said, hey, George, you want to ride? I got a friend. His name is Machine Gun Mike, and he's willing to give you a ride. What might you be concerned about? The machine gun. It's not just a clever nickname. I actually do have a friend named Machine Gun Mike. I'm an American. We all have friends named Machine Gun Mike. So then your concern is safety, right? Yeah, no, this is just me. I vouch for him. If you've known me for 10 hours, I totally vouch for Machine Gun Mike. Ignore the prison tattoos, all that stuff. You may have a swastika. It's fine, whatever. He's a good guy. That thing that would keep you from getting in his car, even if you knew who he was, also a transaction cost. You don't know what's safe and reliable. So Uber is there to also do that. eBay has a star system to tell you how good of a seller you are based on reputation, right? The claim of taxi cab regulation, of actually even money, of regulation of hotels, the claim of regulation of barbers, electricians, doctors, lawyers. Part of the claim was that people wouldn't know and therefore wouldn't be able to accomplish beneficial transactions. You don't know who a good doctor is. You don't know who a safe driver is. You don't know who so in America, we license barbers all over the place. I heard that we don't really do that here, because I can't believe you guys all have good haircuts. Because it's anarchy. It's barber anarchy around here. And you guys are, no, you're just not walking around mohawks. It's nuts. How do you live in this crazy world? But they're supposed to verify something that would help a transaction take place. And maybe that was needed, 100 years ago. But now things are getting crazy. So I want to leave you with the ideas of how we get out of the STATRIX. As I mentioned at the beginning, Uber did more to expose taxi cab cartels than anything Cato could have done in 40 years of its existence. And we have to think about what else we can do to make that happen. What else is possible? It's a business model. McDonald's is not that different than Uber. In the 50s in America, Ray Kroc was one of the people who realized. So McDonald's came in and said, you see the golden arches, you know what you're getting. McDonald's is also in a way selling information. They're selling information about quality and consistency that comes with the golden arches. But now, do we need that anymore when we have Yelp, right? Or anything else? Again, Austin, as I mentioned, Uber said so sort of rewired people's brains that it's okay to get into a stranger's car that they just spontaneously created Uber after it disappeared. They had already reworked the world even when it disappeared. Dining is, again, I said the same thing. But what is needed by the government if you think in this way? This is not like the hard anarchist push. This is the think about what you think might be necessary. I asked you at the beginning, what did Boris Yeltsin think was necessary for the government to do, like run grocery stores, and what was he completely wrong about? And what do you think is necessary for the government to do? And might you be wrong about that? Department of Health, regulation of restaurants, quality, safety, inspection of meat. Is that necessary now? Well, it's a problem. It actually is a problem, Because we have an ability to make the world a better place, and the government is usually the one standing in the way. Why is licensing a problem? Licensing is a problem no matter what it is, and this even licensing of like health outcomes. So imagine the dirtiest restaurant and the cleanest restaurant and the whole scale in between, and then they draw a line and they say you're either like licensed or not. That means the restaurant that is just a little bit cleaner or one that is just slightly dirtier can't serve you food. And someone may be willing to eat at that restaurant. I mean, I was in New Orleans once, which is a wonderfully unregulated place. And I was drunk. I admit I was drunk in New Orleans, you know. And I'm with this guy named Dan D'Amico, who's an economics professor, a totally crazy person. And it's like 4 a.m, we're walking out of the French Quarter, and I'm like, and there's just a guy got like a card table, and he's a big black guy in sweats, and he's smoking a cigarette. He's got 2 hot plates, and he's cooking like pork steak and red beans and rice, and he's just got a cardboard sign that says "Good eating, $12." And I'm like, that is amazing. That would be crazy to eat there. I am going to eat there on the principle of the matter. You go to Tunisia, yeah, you eat street food in Tunisia, you eat street food in many parts of the world, you know you're taking your life in your own hands. Some people eat raw beef, some people don't. Some people eat raw fish, some people don't. Take this same idea of the dirtiest restaurant and the cleanest restaurant, take it to doctors. Here's the worst doctor who finished last in his class at Doctors Inc. University. And here's the guy who finished first in his class at Harvard. Right in the middle is the licensing. And the guy, what do you call the guy who finished last in medical school? Doctor, still. What do you call the guy who just missed the qualifying test by 1 question? Not doctor. What? Master? Sure. But imagine how much information we've destroyed by making everything 1 or 0, like binary. Like you're a doctor or you're not. That person who just failed the test could supply beneficial value, right? I mean, maybe you don't want them to do brain surgery, but if you got an ingrown toenail, like maybe that's okay, right? We've made it so they can't even do that. And nurses who are highly qualified are not allowed to do many things. So we've artificially inflated the price of medicine. Same is true with lawyers. So now we have an ability, so maybe 100 years ago, people wouldn't know how to rate a restaurant or whether or not a restaurant was clean or dirty. Yelp now does that, by the way. So do we need it? All these problems that the state has purported to solve at many times are entrepreneurial problems. Let me put this in a different way. Let's say tomorrow I abolish the Romanian Department of Meat Inspection. Okay, it's just gone. No state meat inspection at all, assuming there is state meat inspection. Okay, because I'll be like, wow, it's just like barbers. It's crazy here. Yeah. So I abolished now. What would be the next? Let's say you're an entrepreneur. What would be the next thing you would think about? Let me ask you this question: who cares about the safety of their meat? There's your market. Entrepreneurs, go forth and do it. Do you have any doubt that if the Romanian Meat Inspection Department was disappeared tomorrow, there wouldn't be someone starting a business the next day, if it was possible, right? And providing maybe more information than the government does. Like, hey, this one is you can eat there. Whew, you might not want to, but the steak is really good. I mean, maybe like a little bit more information. So you can make your own choice about whether or not you're willing to eat like I did at the place in New Orleans. As I said, legal licensing in the United States, complete bullshit. I studied for a test for 2 months to take a test for 2 8-hour days. And the moment I walked out of it, I forgot it all and I've never used it again. Guess, by the way, on step 5, who supports legal licensing? Well, not only the American Bar Association, we're a bunch of a-holes, but there's a huge business of bar preparation materials. Average person pays about $10,000 for the books to study for the test. Now take every other test out there, accounting, like how many players are involved in that? And I would say none of it is needed. None of it. Doctor licensing, I mean, we could get more of this in Q&A, but it's very easy to make the case against medical licensing. And if doctors don't need to be licensed, I submit to you that probably no one else does either. But that's, of course, just the beginning, right? I've talked about a bunch of things here about breaking the public education system, breaking the state-provided or controlled medical system, things that people think are necessary because of the STATRIX, because they lack the imagination to do it. I just want to show you one last thing. This is, I mean, in America, we have, I want to get, our medical system is just bad. One of the things, though, that you can get, if you're a doctor, if you don't take insurance and you don't take Medicare and Medicaid, a bunch of regulations don't apply to you. Like in America, they could walk in and like try and ask for the price of something. Like, hey, I want to get a knee replacement. How much does that cost? They will laugh in your face because no one actually knows the answer to that question. Everyone says, well, you can't supply medicine without in this way. What would prices do in medicine? Well, this is a friend of mine named Ryan Newhoffel. He is one of these doctors, which is a growing movement in America for doctors who are cash only. You can charge it, but they won't take insurance, they won't take Medicare, they won't take Medicaid. But you go in and you pay a yearly fee, and what you get from this is you can call them, you can email them, you can send pictures of like a rash and like say, hey, Dr. Ryan, do I need to come in for this? Flu shots, other prevention, all for cheaper than what insurance supplies. And they also negotiate with suppliers for various things. So then you have all these prices for x-rays. This is, people like an x-ray is $25. I thought that cost like, I had to donate a cornea to get an x-ray. House calls. There aren't house calls in America because insurers, Medicaid and Medicare won't pay for them. And this entire system by which they consult together. This is like a forum where doctors get together and consult because there are all these kind of doctors. So maybe they've seen something like this before. Right? In America, when I show this slide, the first reaction is, holy crap, I thought this was impossible. Right? Because they're Boris Yeltsin in the grocery store in America when it comes to medicine. And maybe here too. I don't know enough about Romanian medical system. But the idea that something like this is not possible. So the first thing I always say is you should think, holy crap, I've never seen this before. And the next thing you should think is, who screwed up the world so bad that this does not exist everywhere? Because we have to think, we don't live in this perfect free market society, obviously. But all the different ways that maybe we're Boris Yeltsin in a grocery store when it comes to whatever. So we have to get Charlie off the MTA. We have to get Charlie out of the public school system. We got to get Charlie out of the private public medical system. We got Charlie out of the horrible licensing system. And of course, screw the DC Metro.